Good evening, Merry Christmas y Feliz Navidad a todos. This is Dr. Amy Salerno, Doctora Latina, also known as Draw Latina. Good evening from frigid New England on Christmas Eve. I know it's cold all across the country, and some folks are out of electricity, are in deep ice and snow, and so my prayers are extended to all of you during this holy season of light, that all remain safe and warm. I had the intention over a month ago to do a probably 5-6 part series on different styles of parenting, starting from infancy and taking it step by step up to school-age child, early and late adolescence, college-age children, and then young adult and adult children, and how our parenting changes through those developmental stages. However, I got very busy with work, and then I got very gripped by the Idaho 4 case, where tragically the 4 young adult students at the University of Idaho were murdered about 6 weeks ago now. And so I thought, instead of starting at the beginning with infancy, I would just dive right into young adulthood, and talk a little bit about parenting styles in general, and then what were the challenges and are the challenges for the parents of Xana, Ethan, Madison, and Kaylee. And everything that I'm going to talk about tonight, I want to assure you I am doing with great self-reflection, humility as a parent who's not perfect, and also just I want to extend my support in whatever I can emotionally and spiritually to the parents of these young lives that were taken so very tragically. I think we all need to stand together as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever we are, as victims of crime like the Idaho 4 have been laid to rest, will be laid to rest, and how are their parents going through the grieving process. So it is with that in mind that I'm going to briefly discuss the classic 3 styles of parenting, and then in recent years there have been 3 or 4 or 5 other styles that have been added. Really, since the inception of social media, I think the classic 3 styles of parenting have evolved, and there are more styles, and that is because as parents we really are required to to grow and morph so quickly in a world that really even 10 years ago was almost what I would say radically different, pre-internet. So the classic 3 parenting styles are authoritarian, authoritative, and laissez-faire. Laissez-faire being a French term meaning let it be, essentially be permissive kind of thing. So authoritarian style is a very rule-based, punitive style that was very, very known back in the early 1900s to mid-1900s, when parents really didn't understand that children needed more than just firm rules and punishment, but they needed some loving guidance and explanation in order to really develop into a healthy adult with good self-esteem. So the authoritarian style actually is not considered to be the ideal. It is really considered to be unhealthy, and it is really, in my opinion, as a physician, and as an adult child who kind of had authoritarian whiffs, if not more, going through my own childhood, it's really an antiquated style of parenting. Now, authoritative parenting is parenting that is firmly rooted in rule base. So there are firm rules. However, those rules are explained in a loving, supportive, kind way to the child. The style also does not mete out punishment, but rather explains consequences, and punishment is understood by the child and is consistent with whatever developmental age the child is. Laissez-faire parenting is sort of a freedom type of parenting, very permissive. And that is very similar, but not so much to the extreme, as uninvolved parenting, which is a new style or new name for probably an old and more conservative laissez-faire. Now it's gotten to this term called uninvolved, and that is when the parents simply just really haven't grown up and they're just involved in their own selves, their own parties, their own interests, and they just let their child sort of bring themselves up on their own. The fifth is known as free-range parenting, and that is when parents, and it's really on the extreme of the bell curve, skinny end of the bell curve. It can be a very good style because it teaches child great independence. So sometimes you'll see a very young child walk themselves down to the park a mile away with their sibling, and they both are under the age of 8. And it is believed by the free-range style of parenting that this is good for the child, and the child will, become a stronger individual. And the free-range parenting is actually can be good as long as it is done really with knowledge of the community the child's being raised in. Are there safety nets like a church community, the neighborhood? What are the crime rates within that community? Are there other parents looking out for the child? Are there store owners that know your child and say, oh, they shouldn't be doing that? So as long as there is some measure of safety net, I think the free-range parenting style for the right child and the right parent can be, a healthy style. So that's authoritarian, which is quite antiquated and punishment-based. Authoritative, which is rule-based, but loving and supportive, and explains to the child how to make decisions, but within the rules of the home. There's the laissez-faire, which is kind of as you go, uninvolved. There's free-range parenting, which we've just discussed, and then there's gentle parenting. Gentle parenting is akin to free-range parenting, though it often is done with much more intentionality vis-a-vis the appropriate developmental phase of the child. So the first, I think, goal before I move on to the young adult / college age child and talk a little bit about the challenges of the Idaho 4 age child or children. First, I want you all to think about what is your style of parenting, and do you think it's a good style? Does it work well for you and for your children? Is there something you could do a bit differently to maybe tweak your style of parenting? And I'll talk a little bit about that as we sort of segue into the Idaho 4 case. Now, in terms of developmental stages, young adult, let's say adolescent to young adult, is really, and for me, I can speak because I have children that are still college age and in college, and one that just finished and is working. I have experienced this stage, the late adolescent to young adult stage of parenting, actually far more challenging and far more sort of exhausting than even when my children were newborns and babies and toddlers. Even though I was up all night, changing their diapers, feeding them, caressing and holding them and coddling them, whatever, the physical exhaustion did not meet near the intellectual, psychological, spiritual, and emotional exhaustion that I've experienced as parents, as a mom of, let's say, young adult children. And I think that's because, for me, it's because I have been thrust into a world that is very different from how I grew up, very different from even how my children were brought up. I mean, when my children were brought up, there was really no computer on a daily basis. There was no social media, no internet like this. So that there was not the 24/7 pop culture wooing, so to speak, voices from hither, thither, and yon, wooing my children and trying to grab their attention. So I think that I have received great competition with all those voices from the world, trying to compete with my one lone voice. And sometimes I see, and I've said this to patients and friends as well, that when, as parents, our goal really, right? Parenting doesn't come with a guidebook, right? We learn as we go along. And our goal is to do right by our child, to foster good and open communication, to imbue values and knowledge into our children's minds and hearts. I believe that we need to maintain their innocence, but not their ignorance. And there's a big difference, innocence versus ignorance. And that we need to equip our child to handle the world. And that's, I think, the latter that I just discussed, equipping our children to handle the world, is really probably where I struggle the most because, again, with social media and the internet, gaming, the secularization of our culture with precocious sexuality, precocious drinking and drugging and that kind of thing, all of that is competing with my one lone voice, and that makes it very difficult. In terms of going to college, the United States, I think, is very unusual in that it is one of the only countries in the world that has a model, a paradigm of university and college where, for the most part, children who do attend college or university actually move away out of the home onto a campus, into a dorm first couple of years, and maybe into an apartment thereafter. And they don't have the touchstone, like in Europe and South America, for instance, Japan and other Asian countries. They don't have the touchstone and the stability of a family where they can go back at the end of each day or 3 or 4 times a week, and they see their parents or their family, and they can sort of reconnect and they can recharge themselves. Instead, they're taken off to a different sort of world, and even the college and university in this day and age aren't really in loco parentis. The 18-year-old is considered an adult because of federal laws like FERPA. I think it's FERPA. It's the Privacy Act, which is similar to HIPAA, which is the Health Privacy Act in medicine. Young people that are 18 and above are protected by FERPA, which is the Federal Education Privacy Act. And so when they go to college, even if you as a parent pay 100% of the bill for the child, you have no rights to know anything about the child's academic standing, academic struggles, successes, no right to know anything about their health, mental health, physical health, anything that's going on with the child within the confines of their university/college experience. So because of FERPA, unless the child once a year signs a waiver and allows the parent to know what's going on, it can mean that there is a complete disconnect between the child and the parent, or the children and the parents, or the guardians. And we as parents have to rely on our child to be completely forthcoming, transparent, and truthful. And as most of us know, and especially as a family practitioner, physician, and psychiatrist, in this developmental stage of being a young adult, children are not going to tell their parents 100% of what's going on. They do deserve privacy. They do have secrets, and we cannot demand that we know everything. And yet, if there is an emergency, if there is a problem, whether academic or otherwise, because of FERPA, we as parents can be blocked by a university or a college from knowing what's going on with our child. In fact, that can be maddening. Interestingly, my child did sign the waiver for FERPA. And I had an initial conversation with an advisor. And yet, no matter her having signed this waiver, that I would be able to communicate. When my child had some struggles academically, I never was able to speak with the dean or the advisor. So they really didn't honor FERPA. All of this is to be said that imagine with the Idaho 4, you send your child off, you have shepherded them through infancy, toddlerhood, school-age children, early adolescence, late adolescence, and now they're young adults, and you have tried to imbue in them the best that you can. And then they go off to college and they unwittingly or wittingly make choices academically, socially, etc., that a parent has no control over. And that can be so challenging as a parent. Now, if you think back to if you did go away to college or graduate school back in the day, there were a lot more safety nets on campus. FERPA didn't exist back in the day for me. It just didn't exist. There were curfews, had to be into the dorm at a certain time. The dorms were locked at a certain time. So there were more safety nets in case there was a problem, and also to help us as young people to be independent, make choices regarding social decisions, academic decisions, spiritual decisions, but there was always a sense of a safety net. And that really doesn't exist today because of FERPA. So in this situation, and what we've been able to glean from some of the photographs, social media videos, police cam videos, regardless of whether Moscow, Idaho is considered to be just a sleepy rural town, a little college town that's hip, clearly there are risks, there are vulnerabilities that occur for any young person that goes off to college. And clearly from what I can see from the different videos, police cams, etc., there is a group culture, or a culture that it appears within the campus of that university that is very focused on the partying, having fun, not locking doors, being carefree, and that may have put those young people into a higher risk in terms of victimization profile. And I can say that I myself had to plead with my children that this is well before the Idaho 4 case, please lock your doors, please lock the apartment. And, the response really was, well, the housemates they don't want to, they have friends that come and go. So even if one or more of those victims wanted to be in a locked, safer home, often, and maybe in their case, it was not possible. And children and young people at that age do believe that they're sort of immortal and don't heed some of the practices for security and safety that when they're in their mid-20s, they then realize, wow, it is something that I need to do. And so, all of this to say, what can we do as parents to try to mitigate risk and risk-taking for our children in the face of a very libertine American culture, a very libertine university and college campus life, and with the onslaught of social media, TikTok, Snapchat, all those things that woo our children? And I don't have the answer. I pray for my children and for myself that I will somehow help them to navigate all of these challenges and make it out safely. Somebody I know said recently that even in the face of being the best parent, imbuing values, shepherding your child, giving them, equipping them with skills to face the world, it's, in this libertine culture, akin to putting your child in a river with a very swift current underneath. Back in the day, it was like your parent would put you in the river. This is a metaphor. And you could tread water, and you might even be able to swim upstream, making it towards adulthood and making it a stronger adult. In this day and age, instead of being able to swim with ease upstream, we put our children in that river, and not only is there a current, and the current being social media, the internet, the libertine values, FERPA laws, etc., that pull our children downstream, but then it really has become almost a vortex, an undercurrent, which can pull our children under and literally risk their lives. And so I get that image sometimes when I get fearful that my child or children are treading water with an undertow pulling them down. But then I try to take breaths, say prayers, and say, let's do whatever we can in the face of this undertow of culture. And let's try to, be strong for our children and help them to face the challenges that we simply did not have to face 20 or 30 years ago. And so this evening, I offer up prayers for the parents of Madison, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan. That you would know a measure of solace, peace, and some type of understanding as you face this holiday season without your children. That you would know that many parents stand with you in your grief. And even though we're from afar and it may be virtual, that we support you in your time of great difficulty. Stay tuned for another discussion on parenting. I think my next will be on the Greek life, fraternities and sororities, and how they represent, it's almost like a clarion call for these young people. For young people, even when I went to college, the Greek system existed. But how does that system today challenge a young adult even more as they try to navigate their way through college and university? Merry Christmas. Be of good courage. Go forward with courage, my friends. Avanti con coraggio. Adios, mis amigos, y feliz Navidad.